Hey everyone, my name's Harrison, and today I'm going to be showing you how to render your own QR codes. We are going to do this ourselves. We're going to take encoded data from a QR code library, and we are going to write the renderer ourselves. And for this video, we're going to focus on basically replicating a normal QR code. But I wanted to demonstrate some of the different designs that we can potentially do with a rendering system like this. So this might be a topic for future videos. If this is something that you're interested in and want to see, please drop me a comment, let me know, and I will try to find a way to do this in a easy to follow video. So for this system, I don't really love the idea of doing it in the client in a browser. So we are actually going to use a Cloudflare worker for this. Cloudflare workers are serverless edge functions that run in Cloudflare's data centers all around the world, and they run close to your users. So you will have incredibly low latency with these, and they can run JavaScript code. So this is going to be a great way to render our QR codes as an API. And that gives you so much flexibility. You can call this from your own backends. You can call it from your front ends, anything you want. And workers are super cheap. So for most people, you're probably not even going to pay anything. Anyways, let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to need. So we're definitely going to need, we could do this in an existing project, but I'm going to use a template here. I will leave a link to this in the description. We're going to use the router. So I'll just go ahead and copy this and I will paste it into my terminal. Now, quick note, let's change my-app to something else. So this is going to be the folder name that it gets set up in. Change it to whatever you want. I'm going to use QR codes. And once it's done, we'll see success. So we can go ahead and CD into QR codes. Okay. And we're going to need one more dependency. So I mentioned that we need something to encode our QR code data. And we are going to use this library. I've used it before. It gets a lot of downloads. It's well supported. Great. And what's awesome about it is it works in the client. Now, I also mentioned we're not using the browser, we're not using the client, but Cloudflare workers run in a runtime that is more similar to the client. And actually, it's not a node runtime. So just keep that in mind. If you're working with Cloudflare workers, often you need browser support and not node support. So let's go ahead and get this installed. I'll just copy this install command. Again, this will be linked in the comments. So check there. Whoops. So I'll go ahead and install this and make sure you're in your folder when you run this install command. Okay, and so now we got everything installed. We're ready to go. Let's go ahead and open up our editor. So I'm using VS Code. Feel free to use whatever you want. It'll all be the same. And let me just reorganize my windows a little bit here. I'll go ahead and close that, close that. I'm just going to get a fresh window here ready to go. So we have our worker project opened up. You'll notice a few new files in here. The one that we're really concerned with is index.js. This is where our JavaScript code is actually going to live. The rest of them are configuration, testing, whatever. We can touch on those later if needed, but really the only thing we care about is the actual application. If we look at package.json real quick, we will see that we have a dev command in here. So let's go ahead and run that. So we're going to do npm run dev down in the bottom here, and it's saying it's listening on this port. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it up here. And we now have some text being rendered out. So this is coming from, let's go ahead and just take a look on line 10 of this template. This is where this is coming from. And I'm actually only going to work off of this route. So I'm just going to clean up some of the comments here. I don't think they're particularly useful. And I'm going to get rid of this, this extra router.get. So I'll delete that out. I'm also going to remove this router.post. I don't need it. So I'll get rid of that. And I will also get rid of this last comment. So now yours should look similar to this. We have a single router.get with a callback, and then we have our 404 route, which, by the way, we can test if we just do something like 404. We have our not found. Cool. Okay, so what do we have to do first? Well, the first thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to encode our data into the QR code format. And the way that we're going to do this is, of course, with that library we just installed. So we'll do import, I'll call it QR code from QR code. Okay, so we have this. And now we need some data. Now, we're going to pass this data in later on, don't worry. But for now, let's go ahead and just set it here. So I'll say const data, and I'm going to make it a URL. You can make this data anything you want. But what's great about QR codes is they're pretty smart about how they handle specific types of data. So if you encode a URL and you render it as a QR code, your smartphone will then know to open it as a link. And that's how usually restaurant menus work. That's how a lot of ads work. So we'll kind of be operating off that same thing here. Awesome. I'm actually going to rename this slightly, data to encode, just so it's a little bit clearer. And then I will do const encoded data. And let's go ahead and write qrcode.create. Now, I don't love the naming of this. It's a little confusing because this doesn't actually create the QR code. It's just encoding the QR code for us. And what will be interesting is let's go ahead and log this out. So we'll log out our encoded data. So to see this in action, you shouldn't have any errors down here. And if you go to your browser and refresh, we're now going to see a whole bunch of data in here. And what we really care about is this modules, which has a couple of arrays in here, and as well as a size. So what's interesting is that the data is being represented in a one-dimensional array. However, if we think about QR codes, they're more like a grid. And so this is going to come into play later, where we are going to have to translate this from a one-dimensional array into a two-dimensional array. And the size here, 25, well, this is how many cells across the QR code is. QR codes, at least to my knowledge, are always square. So this is going to be 25 by 25. Pretty simple. Cool. Okay, so we have that ready. We have our encoded data. The next step that we're going to actually have to do is test to see if we can get it to render something. This won't be like a final render. This will just, let us visualize what we're working on. So the way that we're going to do this is we are going to continue to return a string here. So this is just a plain text string. I'm going to get rid of this console, and I'm going to go ahead and write response, because now we're going to be making our response dynamically. And we need to start looping through the QR code data. And remember, I had said that this array is a one-dimensional array. So we are going to need to effectively turn it into a two-dimensional array. And we're going to do that just by using a doubly nested for loop. So we'll do two for loops, one inside the other. Before I do that, though, I'm just going to actually give myself a couple variables up here, just so I don't have to keep, data.modules.size, just so I don't have to keep writing out encoded data.modules.whatever. And const code data is equal to encoded data.modules.data. Great, so we have our two variables here. Let's go ahead and write the loop. So we'll do for, let's call it I for now. I is less than, this should be code size. And we'll increment I, and let's do the same for j. Let j, 0. J is also going to be less than code size. Can't type today. J++. And I have a typo here. Okay, so this should be good. Now, this is the part where we're going to have to think about this as a grid. And the way that we're going to do this is we're kind of going to create a window or a row offset. So we'll create that row offset. And this is going to be equal to I times code size. So for the first iteration, when I is 0, row offset will be 0. and then our j will effectively be incremented through from basically from 0 up until we hit code size. And then from there, we're going to be on I equals 1. We'll do 1 times code size, which will put us at code size, and j will begin looping through from there. So we're effectively creating a window and stepping through this code size cells at a time. Okay, cool. So if we look at this data over on the side here, we can see it's a bunch of 1s and 0s. These 1s and 0s actually represent whether the QR code should be dark, which is 1, or whether it should be light, which is 0. So we are going to write a quick variable here, const is dark, and we'll make this equal to code data, and we're going to do row offset plus j. So this is going to index into this data here at row offset plus j. And this is going to tell us, you know, at this particular cell, is it dark? Now, let's do a quick visualization. This is where the visualization comes in. We'll do response plus equals, and we'll do is dark. I'm just going to do a quick ternary here. What I want for is dark is going to be, let's go ahead and give it like a black square. We'll give it this one. And for those on Windows that are curious how I did that, it's Windows period to bring that up. So I don't know why it's not giving me a white square. Anyways, we have our 2 squares. In truth, like you could do a 1 and a 0 here if you wanted. I'm just doing these for the visualization. So this is going to print out an entire row for us. However, we also need to make sure that we are appending a new line. So we'll do response plus equals a new line. And this should be good. So now if I hit save, oh, actually, we're not returning anything. So this should be good. So now we're returning our response from up here and we're building it out. So if I go ahead and refresh now, hopefully everything works still. Seems to not be happy though. So I must have broken something. Okay, so it looks like I've created a typo here, and if we go ahead and fix that, it should be fixed. Now, if I zoom out, you'll probably need to zoom out as well. We can start to see something taking shape. This kind of, it's a little bit hard to see. Maybe if I swapped these around, you'd be able to see it better. Now the QR code is white. So the white cells indicate where the QR code is, where the data is. And you're starting to see it, right? We have these, the marker patterns here, the finder patterns, and the rest of the data encoded. So look at that. We're officially rendering QR codes ourselves. Now, this is obviously not that useful. I mean, your phone might not even be able to scan this, especially if we're doing it the white on black. Sometimes it can have issues. So let's think about how we actually want to render this differently. So this is rendered on the server, so we don't have access to anything like Canvas or anything like that. So the easiest way for us to do rendering is actually going to be with SVG. SVG is very easy to write as code, and that's exactly what we're going to do. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. It'll start to make sense once we're actually building it out. So the first thing I definitely want is a block size. And this is going to, this is basically going to be the final size of the blocks. Like each individual cell will be this many pixels. In SVG, that's not so important, but it just cleans up the code a little bit and helps us figure out, first of all, how big is the SVG? And then also how big does each item in the SVG need to be? So we'll give ourselves this block size, and we're also going to write a quick function. So you could write this as an ES6 function. It doesn't matter. In this case, I'm just going to write it as a normal function. Now, what I'm going to use this function for is to actually construct the main SVG document. And children will be an array of elements to append onto it. So the way that we're going to do that is just with a template tag. So we'll do SVG, and we're gonna just need to type out some of this stuff. It kind of sucks, but we'll just do it. Give myself some room here. So width is going to be equal to let's go ahead and insert size. And by the way, while you're following along, make sure that when you write this, you have quotes. If you forget the quotes, it'll break and nothing will work. So just make sure that you write those quotes. I like to write them first when I'm doing stuff like this. I don't often do stuff like this, but it is very nice for quickly writing up some code. And, you know, maybe future video, I can show you what I would do instead to make this a little bit easier to work with. So www.w3.org. And this is /2000/SVG. So this is going to be the namespace for SVG. You don't always need to add it, but some browsers don't render SVG properly if you omit it. So we're going to go ahead and add that. Let's also add our closing tag here. Okay. And so now we got to put something inside here. And what we're going to put in here is going to be children. And we'll just do .join. I'll show you why we're going to do this later on. And now we have our children being rendered. So we have our SVG function. We have block size. We're going to replace this. So response, let's go ahead and change this to blocks, and we'll make it equal to an empty array. Cool. And we're not going to need this, and we are going to change this. So first of all, let's draw a rectangle first. So we're only going to draw rectangles if the cell is dark. So we can first of all just do is dark. So if it is dark, we are going to make a new rect or a rectangle. And we're going to do the same thing that we just did. We're going to make a rect. I'm actually going to just type the whole thing out right now just so I don't make a mistake later. Now, where is this going to be and how big is it going to be? So I and j are integers between 0 and code size. Now, if we so what we could do is make SVG code size big and make these all basically one pixel. But I find that often doesn't look great. So we are going to use this block size. So what we'll do is we'll say const x is equal to I times block size, const y is equal to j times block size, and I need to make sure those are correct. And finally, we need a width and a height, and those are going to be the same thing, thankfully. So we'll just say const size is equal to, actually, sorry, we don't need that. What am I saying? But we do need to add it into our rect here. So we'll do x equals, y equals, and width equals, and height equals. Now, what do we fill in for these? Well, this is obviously going to be x. This is going to be y. And I'm going to fill both of these in at the same time. If you're curious how I did this on Windows, you hold Alt and you can add multiple cursors. So I'll add one here, and we'll do two at once. This is going to be block size. Cool. So yours should look like this. And if it doesn't, then it's probably not going to work. And finally, we need to push these blocks in. So we'll do blocks.push rect. All right, so I'll go ahead and save that. Let me just double check. This isn't working because we don't have a response. So let's just go ahead and make that const response is equal to, and we're going to call our SVG function. We are going to have to decide how big this is going to be. So let's go ahead and say const SVG size is going to be equal to, this will be code size times block size, right? Because code size is effectively how many individual cells there are in a row or in a column. And then block size is actually the rendered size of each cell. And so this is going to give us our final SVG size. And we can pass in our blocks as is, because remember, we're doing a .join on them. So children is expected to be an array. And if we wanted to here, I can show you something real quick where we can write some doc blocks so we get at least some typing. So at param size, this is going to be a number. And if I hit tab size, it'll ask for a comment. Let's do the width and height of the SVG. Children is going to be a string array. And this is going to be elements to add to the SVG. Cool. And I'm not going to do a return here. I won't comment this either, but now we can see that this is getting typed as number, which is very nice. This gets typed as a string array, and we just get, for example, just to show you why I like to do this, if I hit dot and I type join, I actually get the code complete now. Awesome. All right, there is still one thing missing. So we are looping through, we are adding our rectangles to the array. We are setting up the size correctly. We're we're getting a response correctly, but there's still a problem, which is that this isn't being rendered. What's going on? So we have the SVG code, and I can show you how this works later, but this isn't being displayed properly. And the reason, if I can show you real quick, actually, let me just pull this up full size, hit inspect. The reason this isn't being displayed properly is if we hit refresh, and what we're looking for is, let me turn off some of these filters here. Let's go ahead and look at the main page. So the first request, and let's look at the headers. And we're seeing content type, and the content type is text/plain. This isn't what we want. So basically the browser thinks that this is just plain text that's being sent back, and it's displaying it as plain text. However, we want to tell the browser that, hey, no, this is actually an SVG. And the way that we do that is with the response headers. So we'll open that up. We're going to write headers, open up another object here, and we're going to have to use a string here instead of just a regular property name. And we'll do content-type. And what is this going to be? It's going to be image/SVG plus XML. Just like that. So yours should look exactly like this. As far as I know, the capitalization doesn't matter, but try to get this perfect. Now, if we refresh, we still have an issue here, actually. And I'm guessing it's because of, this. This is usually, like I said, this is usually what happens if you omit this. So let's go ahead. I think the issue is that there's an S here. I think it's just supposed to be HTTP. And refreshing, we can zoom out a little bit and look at that. This is an SVG and it's a QR code. And if you pull your phone out right now and you scan it, it should scan properly. So this is great. This is, I think, the perfect time to end. We can kind of recap what we've done here. Actually, before we end, I'd like to make this a little more dynamic. So we're currently passing in this hard-coded data, and that's not super useful. So let's instead pass it in as a query param. And the way we're going to do that is this router.get. This is why I like to use IDI router. This has a property on it. So if we just open up our destructuring here and we write query, let's go ahead and pull this query out and just log it. So we'll do console.log query. Let's see what we're working with. So I'll hit save. In the browser, we're going to append on some query params. And the way to do that is you hit question mark, and we'll do data equals, and let's do the exact same thing. So let's come over here, copy this data, and paste it onto the end. So data equals this URL. I'll hit enter. And here we have our log. So log query is actually, it's the query parameters. Data equals that. Okay, so let's go ahead and use that. Data to encode is actually going to be query.data. We can go ahead and remove this now. And if we refresh, we'll get the same thing, remember, because we're passing in the same data. But now if I just write my name, we're going to get a totally different code. 1, 2, 3, 4, a different code again. So this is going to be great. Now this is fully dynamic. Let me just see if there's anything else quick that we can change. And I think something fun that we can play with right now is changing the color of our QR code. We'll do this quick before we end off, and this should give you an idea of where some future videos can go in terms of, changing the colors and possibly even changing the shapes. So let's go ahead and try that out too. So let's go ahead and add a const color. And let's just set it to be black. Actually, let's set it to be something else. Let's make it red. So FF0000. And we're gonna need to use this color down in our rectangle. If we just come to the very end, just before this angle, we're gonna write fill equals and give it the quotes, and we'll just interpolate our color into there. So we'll hit save, refresh, and now we have a red color. But what if we wanna pass that in? Well, let's go ahead and do that. We can make a new property here. We'll do the ampersand, the and sign for an additional property. We'll call it color, and we'll say it's equal to, and let's pass the same thing in, FF0000. So currently we're not doing anything with it, but if we go query.color, and we seem to have broken it. This is an unfortunate problem with how query strings end up getting used. And the pound in the URL is actually kind of a reserved thing, and we'd need to encode it. However, we can just ignore that. We're gonna instead just pass our colors in as just the hex with no pound, and we'll re-add it. So if I hit save, it's still not gonna work. Oh, and actually that doesn't work either. So what's going on here? We're passing our color, we're using our color, and in fact, if we inspect this, let me go ahead and just close some of this off. If we inspect this, we can see the fill is in here for these elements, right? What's going on? Well, the issue is that there's no pound sign anymore. So we're gonna have to add that. And what we're actually gonna do with this is we'll just use a quick ternary. So if query.color is set, then we are going to set color equals to pound, and we'll interpolate in query.color. Okay, so that's adding the pound in front. Otherwise, we're gonna use black, 000000. So this is all black. Awesome. Let's hit refresh, close that out, and now we have a new color, and we can change it to anything we want. So 00FF00 is green, 00FF. So 0000FF is blue, RGB. And actually, just real quick fun fact, these two zeros, these are the red channels, so it goes RGB. So the middle two are the G, and the last two are the B. And so if we can modify these around, right? Like, for example, if we came in here and made it red and green, so FFFF00, we get yellow. Anyways, that's a fun little tidbit about colors with SVG and hex. Okay, so I think this is a great spot for us to leave the code at. Real quick, why don't we just go ahead and deploy this? So we have our deploy command here. I will run npm run deploy, and it's gonna tell me to log in. I will go ahead and do that right now. So I'll be right back once I'm logged in. Okay, and so once you give it all permission, you should receive a page like this. Feel free to close, so we will. And we're getting an error here, and it's telling us that we're missing our name. So we actually need to go into our wrangler.toml. And here we go. There's a comment there for to do, and let's just call this QR codes. Okay, or you can, this is going to be your project name in Cloudflare. So name it whatever you feel like you want. And by the way, the code we've written here, this can be used anywhere. Like, it doesn't have to be put on Cloudflare. You can almost copy paste this, and this is really similar to like an Express server. So if you wanted to use this in your own project, you really only need to replace whatever the route is. Everything else is basically the same. This you might have to replace as well if you're using Express, but all this code will work. This works in the browser. It works in Node, so nothing special there. Okay, so let us deploy again. And there we go. We have a deployment here. So this is the URL that I'm getting. This is from my personal account. Let me go ahead and open this. And we're getting an exception. And remember, This is because we actually we didn't pass any data, but if I go ahead and pass some data, so data equals Harrison, and I spelled my name wrong, which is sad, and I zoom out, there we go. We have a server render. This is server rendered on Cloudflare at the edge. And what's so awesome about this is that if we go and hit refresh, we should see, let me just find where it is. Yeah, so if we go ahead and look at our timings here, we can see that this took an 18 milliseconds, 21 milliseconds to come back to us. So that's very fast. Let's try another one. Cool. Okay, so this is where I will leave things. And please let me know if there is anything else that you would like to see, particularly with, how are we going to do the different shapes? For example, like a diamond or a circle. And also, like, how are we going to do some of the more complex colors? So feel free to let me know if you think that's interesting. Please like, subscribe, whatever, if you feel like I deserve it. And have a great day. Thank you so much for watching.